Right. Hello, everybody. Uh, Thank you very much for tuning in tonight. Appreciate that. Let me know if everything's good with the sound. Good, Bob. You're on, man. Appreciate that. I had to reset everything up because right before all the stuff happened, I had to go to South Carolina um, and do what I did. I took everything down and recorded a seminar for Kim for the job that she got released from the next day. But hey, thanks, John. And so I had to reset everything up and do all that. Good news on that front is Kim is set to start work with another company, doing what she did before, doing wound care and consulting and training and things like that, and doing it around a region of our state. And she's supposed to start that on the 1st. So it gave her a little time off. So that's great. And thank you guys for praying for us during this and all the reaching out. It means a lot. I appreciate you guys so much. Also, John's on here. John was just at the house. And so all the another good news is John has moved into the neighborhood. He's I don't know, 2 minutes from the house, from my house. He's about 2 minutes away, and he bought a house right up the road here. Um, and so I get to see him more often, which is good. He gets to see me more often, which is questionable. But I think he's enjoying himself, and we're glad to have him around here instead of an hour and 40 minutes away. I mean, Branson's a cool place, but it's a cool place to visit, and but it's a long way away. It's too far. So we're good. We're glad to have him around. Um, Also, thank you guys for praying for my dad. He is improving little by little. Last time I talked to him a couple days ago, I tried to give him breaks because he's not a phone person anyway in the best of times, and uh, so I don't call him often. But the last I heard from him and from Ann is the speech therapist said that he was doing everything so well that they could not um, keep him on. Medicare wouldn't pay for it because he scored so high on his speech therapy test, which was the main thing that was really an issue. And so um, he really kicked it into gear, kicked it into gear so he wouldn't have to do that. But he's still, not 100%. So if you guys would continue to keep him in your prayers during this time, because it's, still an uphill battle for him. And so we thank you for that as well. Love you guys. Mike, thank you for being on too, buddy. All right. So the situation with Janie is I don't know any specifics as far as up top and the fellowship up top. We're going through a transition. We've been going through a transition, and this just kind of um, gives us another level on it. Certain things are now having to be addressed that weren't having to be. And so all of that is in limbo. Well, not limbo, but we're just in a time of transition, which is a good thing. I take it as a good thing. And I'm looking forward to where this goes um, as far as the fellowship here locally. And this will continue on as far as what happens with this. But I'm just just to see what happens and how the transition takes shape. But I've been encouraged in the last couple of times that we've met together. Um, there just seems to be um, a real sense of unity and real fellowship happening there. Not saying it wasn't there before, but you can really sense something different and new happening. And so be praying for us during this time. Be praying for Brother Lumen during this time. Everybody is aware that his mind is not great. He's has dementia, and to whatever degree. I'm not a doctor, so I wouldn't be able to tell you, but it's not great. So we are looking toward having a conference here at the end of the month, in June. I mean, the end of June, and so we're looking forward to have the folks that are coming. Everyone, maybe some of you that are coming to Leslie, Arkansas, to be a part of the conference. But we'll also have that broadcasting on the CMI web TV channel where we do our Sunday mornings, and that'll happen too. So none of that's been postponed with Janie's passing. We've just, you know, different people have different roles, and we have to get all that straight. So again, thanks for your prayers, concerns, reaching out the way you have during this time. I love you, and I'm very appreciative of it. All right, guys. I want us to continue basically in Hebrews 4, and this will probably maybe be the last. A lot of times especially with this time, with the distinct space of time between the lessons, and I always forget things that I've covered, but those things are there and they're recorded, and that's great. But what I do want us to look at in Hebrews 4, and again, basically, this may be the last lesson we do in the 4th chapter, except touching on it as we enter into the 5th chapter, is to look at Hebrews chapter 4, the very end of it, and to concentrate on this wonderful introduction of the high priest. And mostly I want to focus, and I may not get to this to somewhere around the end of it, and I'm not going to take this forever, but I want to mainly focus upon the nature of his priesthood, of Christ's priesthood, the nature of the one who is our high priest. And I want to focus in the light of that upon the reality that he attained in his priestly ministerial work, and then that which he perpetually holds together, that which he holds and is secured by his being our priest standing before God. I want to look at that because this is our salvation. Salvation is not separated from the state of the one in whom we are found. And we have to understand that. So he begins to introduce now the high priest, the one in whom we are found, the one who is the minister over this house, which house we are. And if we will go in, as we will, but into chapter 5 and 6, things that seem to deviate from it and talk about the need of milk and meat, which we've talked about, that division between the old and the new, the milk and the meat, and the necessity to partake of the meat. And then his warning to them not to lay again the elementary foundations of Christ, those teachings concerning Christ that were given under the law, the shadows, the testimonial elements of that system. And he's telling them, don't go back to that. He'll say it at the end of this letter, I believe, do not return to those things that did not profit you when you were in it. He knew they were unprofitable. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight, but He realized this is unprofitable. This is not going to benefit your soul. So do not return to these things. And he does that in chapter 5 and 6 of Hebrews in the context. And this is where he also talks about, I'm not trying to get in the weeds here, but where he also talks about if someone who has tasted of this heavenly gift and the power of the world, the word of God and the powers of the world to come, which is the new covenant and the new age, the age of Christ, the age of the fulfillment. And they were to turn again or turn back to the law, there is no repentance found under that system because there's no more sacrifice for sin, because the once and for all sufficient sacrifice has come in Christ. So they can't go back to a system that never could save them and translate their soul from death unto life or from darkness to light and find in that system, having gone back to it, anything of true deliverance and righteousness or redemption. And that's what he's saying there. But that's all in the context of the high priest, because the leading up to those things and after it, you see him speaking of the high priest who has passed into the heavens. And after, in chapter 6, he begins to speak, even culminating the promises made to Abraham and God swearing by himself that he would do, because he had no, swearing by himself of what he would do and the promise that he's made, because there's no other he could swear by greater than him. And all of that comes to be realized in this one standing in the Holy of Holies, anchoring us beyond the veil. What a beautiful reality. And this is our context in which we're writing these things. And somebody please look at that. John, hold on just a second. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Never know. Anyway. But anyway, that's the context of the letter, and that's the context of this high priest is always the basis of what is being said. So we need to keep that in mind as we approach this. But I wanted us to lay this out. It's very important that we lay that out and understand the context is always surrounding the high priest, even in these places where we think it may have been lost. It's about the high priest. It always, from now on, everything's going to be surrounded by the work and the person and the reality of the high priest. And so that's how I see it, and that's the way we need to look at it. So I want to concentrate here. So let's go to Hebrews chapter 4 and just read these verses real quick. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12 through 16. For the word of God is quick and powerful, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to dividing asunder of soul and spirit and of joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. Neither is there any creature not manifest in his sight, but all things are naked and open unto the eyes of him with whom we have to do. Seeing then that we have a great high priest that is passed into the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our profession. For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. And again, we talked about this on and off throughout, touching on it, but that word help there is when they would bind the hull of a boat to keep it in the storms from breaking apart. They would bind it with strong ropes and just hold it through the midst of the thing. In the midst of that turmoil, there is something that binds you together and holds you together where you won't break. And that's him. It's embodied in his person. He doesn't have to do anything for that to be the case. He is that unto us. That is the case because he is in us, because he is our salvation, because he is our life. And that's just the reality of who he is and what he has been made unto us. This is just, you know, we always, and we'll get into this about objective and subjective and the distinction later, but we always want to validate God's presence and God's relationship to us by these things that he does for us. But we have to understand in a very objective, which is the most real way, in a way that is not determined by my understanding, but God's understanding, in a way that is settled in heaven itself. He holds us in place. He keeps us sure and securely. And we can deviate our attention and look unto ourselves, and the moment we do that, we're on shaky ground as far as we know and as far as our perspective is. But God's perspective is the one who stands in his presence, and that's why it's vital for us to take this time, and why the Hebrew letter takes the time to introduce us to this one and show that everything that is being said, the summation of it all, the thing that is the true point of it all, is we have a high priest. And so, Ray, good to see you on, man. So in this, I want us to understand that there is an objective, and I talked about this, I think, maybe the past Sunday. There is an objective reality, and this letter and all the letters are written in view of an objective, God-wrought, Christ-secured reality. The subjective part of our growing in grace, comprehending, knowing even as we are known, apprehending what has apprehended us, that subjective part is the work of the Spirit in the soul to teach us what God has done and who he is in us. The objective part, however, is that which anchors us in reality. The seeing of reality doesn't anchor us. The seeing of reality makes us aware that we have been anchored the whole time, that we have been held in place in the sufficiency of the one who does stand in the Holy of Holies, since we were found in him by new birth. So we have to we need to understand, and I think the preaching of the gospel is how we do that, because again, as we grow in understanding, we begin to comprehend these things, and these things become a recognition of the soul. But there is a reality that is certain and sure and real and permanent before realization dawns on us. You understand? So there is reality, which is binding and sure and unchangeable and unmovable. And then there's the realization. And we cannot mix the two and make the one the other. Realization doesn't make it real. But real always calls our souls to a true God-given understanding, so that we could know reality as God knows it to be and see it in the face of the same one that he sees reality in. Because again, the way God will teach us is show us all things embodied in Christ and not ourselves. He's not going to make us the objective or the object of his affection. He is going to show us that the one he loves is the one he's given to us. And therein we are loved because the beloved one is our life. Again, that may seem not so great to some people. To me, it's the good news of our salvation. And that is the basis upon which this letter is written. And so to me, as we read these verses and we begin to see the introduction of this high priest, it will bring us to understand the nature of the one who is described by the letter of Hebrews that ensured that he would meet the inborn, innate need of humanity. And we're going to read that tonight. We needed him to be our high priest. It was a necessity. It was a necessity that he become our high priest. Why? It's because of his nature. It's because he is of such a nature, such an otherness. I don't know, you guys have heard that term, I'm sure. The otherness of Christ is the reason we necessitated him to be our high priest. And we're going to read that. But I want to do that in the light of our sanctification. I want to do that in the light of our being sanctified by God. And we talked about that a little bit in the last lesson, but I want us to see him as our sanctification, as Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, because that is embodied in this picture of the high priest. Him being made unto us is basically pointing directly to the Holy of Holies and saying, there's your sanctification. There's your righteousness. It's not found out here where you can observe you and others. It's found there where God sees his son. God sees the one who is holy and perfect. And therein you are found, you are known, and you are secured in that. So it is that one who brings us to a state of absolute simplicity and singleness. And I know I harp on that. I hate the word harp on it, but I know I talk about this quite a bit, about simplicity and singleness. But to me, that is the core of our rest and our Sabbath. It is the glorious simplicity of Christ and his sufficiency. That in that one, because again, I've talked about this ad nauseum at times, but the word simplicity, when Paul talks about do not be as Eve was and do not be swayed from the simplicity of Christ. I forget the exact wording. But he speaks of the simplicity of Christ. Well, that word is basically has two meanings, and those two meanings can actually look like they're contradictory to one another, because the one means singleness and the other means fullness or abundance. It's the same word with those two seemingly opposed definitions. Why? Well, because in the singleness of him, God has found everything. God has fulfilled all things. That in his singleness, the abundance of all divine reality abides. And because we have that one, we are blessed with all spiritual blessings. And even again, that word is singular, because the blessings of God that are spiritual and perfect and permanent are embodied in one. And therein again, we have a beautiful picture of our high priest, the simplicity of one, the meaning, true abiding rest and assurance is found in his, as our priest, his enduring and unending priesthood over all who are found in him, over the household over which his ministry is exercised, which we are. So before we get into that, though, I want us to reconsider some aspects of our last lesson, and I'm going to add something to it before we get to the end. And as stated, we have to recognize this letter. We have to recognize the transitional nature of the letter. And we've been talking about that. Declaring the arrival of one consummating reality unto which the previous prophetic age pointed. This is spoken of in a great, throughout the scripture. It's spoken of in apocalyptic language in a lot of places. And language to such a degree that it's been misapplied by many to be this cataclysmic future event that may transpire at some point in time. But that's not the case. So I want us to go back to these verses that we looked at in the last lesson, and that's Matthew chapter 13, because we were talking about this division still that he brings as the word of God. And again, that is totally in line with introducing us to this one who stands in the presence of God, because everything else but him is removed. Remember, again, the first chapter, we keep pointing back to it because that is a pin, kind of a hinge where everything kind of latches upon. But they are removed. Heaven and earth, that first removed, you remain. That's what he says to the Son. And this is what we're observing. The Son comes as that abiding, remaining, permanent, perfect embodiment of God's will being satisfied, God's will being accomplished. Lo, I come, right? The whole volume of the book was about him. Now we're seeing the age and the time in which his coming fulfills everything. Now he has come to do exactly what was written concerning him. And that brings about a division. That brings about this change from one thing, testimonial, to fulfillment. One thing pointing toward, and the other is the person to which it pointed. And there's no third option. There's no gray area beyond him. He is the teleos, the end, right? He is the end of the matter. There is no further need for anything else. We see that again in God's rest found in the seventh day, that he separated from all the days of labor when he was working toward the end of his labor. Now in the seventh day, he rests and he hallows it and he sanctifies it, setting it apart as something untouched by those other 6 days. And that's what we're seeing, is these two things, but the one that remains being the greater, the better, as the Hebrew letter will continually say. But in Matthew 13, here's some language that is used that people misconstrue and misapply to future events. Then Jesus sent the multitude away, and this is Matthew 13 again, verse 36. Jesus sent the multitude away and went into the house, and his disciples came unto him, saying, Declare unto us the parable of the tares of the field. And he answered and said unto them, He that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. Now he's already told about the parable, but now he's explaining it. And we've already talked about this in past lessons. The tares, the wheat. He's not talking about good Christians, bad Christians, where we can point the finger and say, oh, of course, that's a tare. There's no doubt about it. He's talking about two things. The first and the second, again, the old covenant, the new, those who would receive Christ being the wheat, those who would not and continue in disbelief and continue with a system that has been superseded by the coming of the greater, that's the tares, and they continue and they grow up together. But there comes a time, the fullness of time, where the separation is made, where those two things that were allowed to grow together at the same time, there comes a time where they have to be both. First, the recognition of the distinction happens, and then the removal of the one and the keeping of the other. We've talked about that already, and I won't get into all that. But so he says, the field, the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed are the children of the kingdom. But the tares are the children of the wicked one. Now, we would look at that and think sinners, but you got to think, what did he say to the Jews? What did he say to the leaders of that system? You're of your father, the devil. Wicked and perverse generation, he would call them. He's talking about that generation that would continually try to hold on to the externality of a law that assured them a righteousness that they had a role in, right? It was externally attained and externally evidenced righteousness. And that's what they wanted to hold to. And it's even more sinister than that when you look at the other parables of Jesus, and they knew that the heir um, was going to receive his inheritance, and they're like, no, it belongs to us. Let's kill the heir. Now, so it gets darker than that, but just to simplify it in a way, is he's speaking when he speaks of the wicked ones too, those under the law and those holding to the law, not those who were going to come from the law to him, but those holding to it as legitimate and as of God instead of him. The enemy that sowed them is the devil, and the harvest is the end of the age, the world. And the reapers are the angels or the messengers. The messengers, and I think here he's speaking of the messengers of the gospel, those who bring the gospel and the good tidings of Christ's coming. Those are the angels he's speaking, not winged creatures flying around. He's speaking of messengers, because you remember in Revelation he'll write to the angel of the church. Well, that's basically a pastor or a leader or a minister in the church. So he's talking about ministers declaring the gospel. They are the reapers. What do they do at the end of the age? Because this is when all this is happening. Therefore, the tares are gathered and burned in the fire. Now, we talked about this fire, and we'll talk a little more tonight about it. God is a consuming fire. This is that same transition that we read about in Hebrews chapter 12. This shaking of one thing, where the permanent thing that cannot be shaken, the kingdom of God, will remain. Then we get into it being burned with fire. And again, this has been so misunderstood to mean some kind of a future event where God was going to burn everybody up. But it's not. He's talking about the removal of the one thing as by fire. We'll talk about more of that as we go. So what does it say? And therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire. So shall it be in the end of this age. Now, again, we've talked about that. The coming of Christ is the culmination of that age. It's the end of the world. Remember what Hebrews 9 will say. Once at the end of the world in King James, age, at the end of the age, he came to put away sin once and for all, sacrifice himself. Those who present him as the end of the law, present him at the end of that age. Those who are proclaiming the gospel of the coming of the kingdom that cannot be shaken, coming of the true heir to receive the promises that were made unto him, the coming of a new covenant that be written in the heart and not on stones. This happens. And in the light of that, and as a consequence of that, there is a distinction made between the tares and the wheat, and the tares are gathered and burned in the fire. Not hail, removal. Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all that offend, and them which do iniquity. He's going to take it all out. There's going to be understand, this is the moment where there becomes something perfect and pure. Now, he's not addressing you and me as the purity and perfection of it. He is saying this end of the age and this reaping that happens brings about something that is pure, untainted, and incorruptible. And shall cast them into the furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear. Now, again, this is speaking of the division between, and we're going to talk about some of the other places where fire is used, but you're seeing the removal of one thing, the judgment of that, the judgment of those who would hold to the law and refuse the coming of their deliverance, the coming, what does he say? You have basically refused the day of your visitation. Therefore, your house is left unto you desolate. There's a destruction that happens there. And we're not talking about the edifice of the old covenant, like the temple being destroyed in 70 AD. Yes, that happened, and a lot of these things point to that. However, there was something already accomplished before those external edifices were removed. There was something that rendered that first body, that first thing, dead. That's why the eagle or the vulture, depending on how you look at it and what you read, what version you read, comes to pick the bones off of the carcass in Matthew 24, because it's already dead. Jerusalem, that system, the law, all of it, already dead. The army came to pick the bones off of that system to remove its external evidence having it that it had ever existed. But there was something the cross and the Lamb of God had already accomplished to make that happen and make that possible to happen. Okay. Now, in John chapter 15, he says this: I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him, he bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. So if anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away as a branch and dries up, and they gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. Guys, this is talking about those who would be found in him or not. He that hath the Son hath life, he that hath not the Son hath not life. They refused him, but to those who received him, he gave the power to become sons of God. The same thing is being said. These are ways of describing judgment, and we've misunderstood these things, right? And this is what the end of the age wrought, not merely in 70 AD, and I'll read this, for this is my comment here, not merely in 70 AD, because it removed the externality of that system. The coming of Christ at the end or consummation of the age of testimony brought an end to the governmental and ecclesiastical intention of that dispensation. All right. Heaven and earth were shaken. That's what he talks about. The governmental and the ecclesiastical part of that system was removed. Then in Hebrews chapter 12, just to get us here, and then we'll go a little further. Hebrews 12, verse 26 through 29, his voice shook the earth then, but now he promised, saying, once more I will shake not only the earth, but also heaven. That expression, yet once more, denotes the removing of the things which can be shaken, as of created things, the things made with hands. He will make that distinction in the letter of Hebrews, that he has gone as our high priest into heavens, into that which was not made with hands. We're seeing that distinction. Created things, so that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. You remain. He's already said that in the first chapter. This is not something beyond that. It's just another way of explaining it as the culmination of an age, as the reason you have come from. They looked for this in Hebrews 11 to you have come unto Mount Zion. How is that possible? Because he's removed the shakeability of the transient and temporary, and he has established a permanent and everlasting kingdom, and we are found in it. We are his church. We are his nation. We are his kingdom. Therefore, since we received the kingdom, have received, now look, have received, so it's not future, a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let us show gratitude, by which we may offer to God an acceptable service with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. There's the fire that these things come face to face with. When the coming of the one who culminates it all, it's faced with this. It burns in the presence. It is cast into a fire of the coming of that which is new. It is removed entirely. And that's what we're seeing. Now, in the light of that, I want to take this a little bit and bring it from transition in the coming of Christ and before basically the preaching of Paul and different ones to what Paul says. in 1 Corinthians chapter 3. John and I were talking about this. He didn't know I already had this to talk about tonight, but he was talking about it. We talk about this quite often. I want to look at it in the context because it's applicable to this context. It is primarily applicable to the context of what we're reading in Hebrews. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, starting in verse 8. Or is this 9? Verse 9. For we are laborers together with God. You are God's husbandry. You are God's building. Remember which house we are, saying the same thing. According to the grace of God, which is given unto me. This is Paul writing. As a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation, not a foundation. I've not merely given you foundational teachings. I have laid the foundation. And another builds thereon, but let every man take heed or be cautious how he builds thereon. For other foundation can no man lay than what is laid, who is Jesus Christ. The foundation is taken care of. You, as another presenter, as another declarer, as someone else that's going to speak the gospel, apparently, and he gives both sides here. Be cautious and take heed how you build on this foundation. Now, in the light of this, what Paul is addressing primarily at this time is those who would present something other than the sufficiency of Jesus by faith alone, instead of, the sufficiency of Christ being our portion, or those who would build upon Christ as our foundation, to bring upon that perfect and pure foundation the temporal, earthly, natural, fragile teaching, declaration of human effort, religious zeal, and law observation. Now, let's go on, because we know that's what's happening with Judaizers coming in. We know that's what's taking place, and Paul's fighting that here just like he is the other, because we're going to see in 1 Corinthians, at the end of it, he begins to talk about the transition between these two men and what that brings about and how we're delivered from the law by that transition from mortal to immortality, from corruptible to incorruptible. The law, sin, and all of that is taken care of in that transition. But in the midst of it, they're being told you've got to add circumcision, holy days, and touch not, taste not, handle not. So those he's looking at as those who are coming upon this pure, perfect foundation and saying, I'm going to bring this thing that is a natural thing, pointing to a spiritual thing, but that which is earthly, that which is temporal, that which is not divine, not eternal, divinely orchestrated, but not divine in substance, and build it on this foundation. And then he'll talk about this. Let's go ahead and read it because I'm getting ahead. So take heed how you build on it. For other foundation can no man lay than that which is laid, who is Jesus Christ. Now, if any man build upon this foundation, he's going to give two different types or kinds of materials. If any man build upon this foundation gold, silver, precious stone, that's one category. Wood, hay, stubble, that's another. But he's saying those who preach it, those who build, because he's, as a minister of the gospel, a builder, a master builder, he's laid the foundation. These other builders who come in, they can build not with the eternal, perfect, and you're going to see the nature of these materials is one can go through the fire we've been talking about, One can go through the fire untouched and unchanged, not destroyed by it. The other will be destroyed and perish by the fire. And so you have these two different materials that can go upon this foundation, and he understands that they can do both. They could do both. I mean, this is the man that saw Peter do it and accused him in the midst of the people because he was playing the hypocrite and he was condemned. And he understood. He brought something stubble-like, hay-like, wood-like. He brought don't eat that onto the foundation of Paul, who understand it doesn't matter. You know, that's not what this is about. So anyway, I want you to get the kind of the context of this. So let's see again. Gold, silver, precious stones, one category of the materials you can bring upon this foundation. That's the declaration of Christ as the end of the law for righteousness, as the new covenant, as righteousness made unto us. All of that. That's his sufficiency is being preached. Him, his death, burial, and resurrection, the superiority of the new covenant found in him and the priesthood that he has. All of that's gold, silver, precious stones. Everything else, wood, hay, stubble. Preaching the law observation still necessary. God, we could bring in so many doctrines we still bring in, but I don't want to do that and just taint this. I want us to understand this is those two things, the law and Christ. That which testified of him, presented him in an enigmatic testimonial way, and him. That's the two things we're addressing here. But in verse 13, he goes on. He says, every man's work shall be made manifest. Depending, no matter, however, and whatever you bring on that foundation as a minister or as anybody, just declaring Christ or what you think is Christ to someone, you're building on a foundation that is perfect. You're building on a foundation that has been laid, the foundation. And so every man's work that he has brought on that foundation will be made manifest. It will be apparent. What? The material of it, what it's made of. Why? How? For the day shall declare it. What day? The day of the coming of Christ, the day of the new covenant. You are children of the day. That day reveals it. That day declares the nature. That day leaves, again, as he says in the 4th chapter, there's not one thing that he is blind to, not one thing that this one who has done all of this and brought such a rest and a division between these two things, there is nothing now that is not laid bare before him. Hey, Rob, there is nothing that is hindering his view. He sees all things open and clear. Do you not think he sees what's on that foundation? And the day that he has brought about, that day of the Lord, that day in which he had promised, in that day, this is the new covenant, that day that has no end and is flooded with the true light that now shines. That day makes manifest and declares the nature of the material you're bringing on the foundation. Because that your work will be revealed by fire. And the fire will try every man's work of what sort or material or kind it is. That's still true now. It takes us recognizing the day that has dawned, the reality of it, the understand, the truth. It does take that. God knows it to be true. God knows it to be in contrast to the nature of the foundation, that it doesn't belong there. But it takes us the seeing of Jesus, the understanding, the growing in grace to understand the incongruence of the thing that was brought upon it to the perfect foundation it's brought upon. We can still, have questions. It's the Spirit of God that teaches us the difference, but God knows it. The day declares it. The day and when that day becomes clearer and clearer to our soul, we begin to understand that these things are incompatible. That the distinction God has made becomes the apparent, or not the apparent, the recognition and understanding of your soul. That's him bringing the division between the soul and the spirit, that which is of us and that which is of God, that which is temporal and that which, that's what you're seeing, that which is of man and that which is of God. That once and for all cut between two dispensations comes to be the realization of our soul too. But it is not hidden from God either. God knows these realities. That's the objective. That's the thing that is true nonetheless, regardless of our comprehension of it or lack thereof. But the fire, what fire? The same fire we've been talking about. The fire that consumes the tares and leaves the wheat. The fire that which is not abiding in him is thrown into, and those who are bound in him as the true vine, which is the true Israel of God, those who are his by new birth, they remain. They're not consumed in fire. They're not destroyed. It is that harvest that came at the end of the age, as we read, the fire consumed it. God is a consuming fire, took away the first thing, that which could be shaken, and leaves that which cannot be shaken. But look what he continues to say. The fire shall try every man's work, what kind it is, what material is. Is it the temporal, fragile, human, man-made philosophies of men, teachings, which is wood, hay, stubble, that which is destructible, that which is not eternal? I mean, even Colossians, as he's writing these things about that which was a shadow, the law, and that which is Christ himself, and all of that, what he will say is that the eating of meat, I think I may even have that. Let's see if I did. Oh, yeah. Here it is. Because it goes into this, let no man beguile your reward, because we're going to talk about the reward here in a second, because he says that as well. But let's read that. Colossians chapter 2, verse 18. Let no man beguile you of your reward in a voluntary humility and worshiping of angels, intruding into those things which he hath not seen, vainly puffed up by his fleshly mind. Now, there's a beguilement that's going to try to take your reward. It's just taking something already yours. Again, in the light of the context, it's the one who wins the race and his has the crown on it. That's the reward. And then the umpire will come in, and that's the Judaizers and those who think you still need to abide by the law observations and find righteousness by it, and touch not, taste not, handle not. And they come to you and say, not quite. You're not quite there. You're not quite perfect yet. I don't see it. You're not manifesting Jesus enough. Well, we've lost a lot of time, guys, when that is our pursuit. When the manifesting of Jesus is the pursuit and Jesus isn't, we have a problem. There is a beguilement in that robs you of a reward and a precious gift. I'm talking about the reality of gold, silver, and precious stones. that treasure in earthen vessels. That's what we preach. That's what we bring upon this foundation that will never be burned, and that is the declaration of a permanent and ongoing, enduring reality that never changes on us. But we get so caught up in the manifesting of it and looking like Jesus and trying to demonstrate something in whatever form that finds itself. I mean, to some people, it was dressing, like you were back in the 1800s when I was in the Church of God. The women had to anyway. Men got away with everything, but the women had to look a certain way. And then over here, it's manifesting and taking over governments and the seven, now what do they call it, the seven mountain mandate, where we take over government and we take over education and entertainment. I mean, that's a teaching out there, baloney teaching, but it's a teaching that's out there, and to them that defines the ultimate aim of God. And then you have the ones that say, if you're not rich and have millions of dollars and drive these type of cars, you're not there yet. Not quite. And they're beguiling you. They are trying to take from you a reward, a prize, a precious gift that he's already given to you, because you are listening to those who are not holding to the head and finding in him sufficiency as God knows it to be. There is a beguilement there. And many people have been. But then he talks about the nature of those beguiling things: not holding the head, from which all the body of joints and bands, having nourishment ministered, knit together, increases with the increase of God. Wherefore, if you be dead with Christ from the rudiments of the world, that's the elements of that previous age of testimony, why, as though living in that age, are you still subject to those ordinances, which is, touch not, taste not, handle not? Why? Because they are to perish with the using, and thereafter the commandments of men. Listen to the nature of the things he's saying they give so much attention to, thinking that makes them holy, and that gives them and brings them into that which is better and that which is greater, and will actually get them the reward God's already given them. What you'll get is sidetracked. And most Christians are, most people are sidetracked. You want this when you already have everything. And this you get or assume you're getting, never going to make you happy. It's never going to satisfy you. Why not just set our hearts to know the one in whom we are known, instead of being deviated by the deceptions of men and religion? But these things are to perish with the using. What is he saying? They're like wood, hay, and stubble. They are perishable. They are temporary at best. They will not stay. They will not last. Remember what we talked about. This whole letter of Hebrews introduces us to the eternal and permanence of Jesus Christ as God's ultimate goal being reached. The permanence of him, you will remain. The permanence of him, an unchangeable priesthood. He will never die. His priesthood will never end. He is referred in the light of Melchizedek, who had no beginning or end of days. You understand why it's important that we are now introduced to this one? Because everything else can change. Everything else has been removed. Everything else is wood, hay, stubble. God in the high priest, notice the materials: gold, silver, precious stones. What was on the breastplate of this high priest? On this foundation, only one can stand, and only one can be declared. And that's the permanence of this high priest in whom we live and move and have our being. Now, let's go on for just a second. I'm out of my time, but the fire will try every man's work, what sort it is. If any man's work abide, that means continue, and is not burned up, he which he has built thereon, he will receive a reward. And we're going to read some of that in a moment. If any man's work shall be burned, meaning it was wood, hay, stubble, and not of God, and not intended to be or intended to last, because it was of a temporal testimonial age, even. That man shall suffer loss, but he's not destroyed. Now look at this. This is why I'm saying this is more about those who would try to hold on, but those who would come finally to understand the better that Christ is, because he says this: he himself shall be saved, yet so as by fire. The same fire is his salvation. The same fire that destroys that first thing saves him. Why? Because he now, in the light of that thing, in the light of that fire, that consuming fire that has brought about something permanent now, in the light of that, he lets go of the temporal things. He sets his affection on what is above, right back to Colossians chapter 2 and 3. He no longer holds to the temporal things that perish as you use them. He now has set his affection on the permanence of Christ's sufficiency. And he's saved by fire. When did that ever happen? When did that ever happen? Well, Philippians chapter 3, verse 7 through 9. What things were gained to me, those I counted loss for Christ. Yea, doubtless I counted all things loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss. Same wording: suffered the loss of all things, and count them but dung, that I may win Christ. You see what it did? It saved him from the temporal externalities of law and that religion, and brought him to the permanence of what is real and unchanging. And now he can let that go, that which is behind him. He'll call it later in Philippians 3. And he can pursue the understanding of a permanent and abiding, unchanging priesthood in the person of Christ. He can see the fulfillment. He can see a fullness that he could never see under that previous administration. But what did he do? He come face to face with a consuming fire that showed him the end of the one thing that he was holding on to. And in the light of it, he let go. And he was saved by fire. He was saved by it, because he come to suffer the loss of all but him. And he goes on: count them at dung, that I may win Christ and be found in him, not having my own righteousness. Wow, that's real salvation by fire, because there's no other righteousness but Christ's, which is of the law, but that which is through the faith of Christ, the righteousness of God by faith. This is a man who has been saved as through fire. And his works, his labor, all that was gained, all that he found profitable under the law, circumcised, the 8th day, all the things he enumerates that would give him, in man's calculation, reason to boast. Those things that he once boasted in himself, he suffered the loss. He suffered the loss because he had found what is of great gain, the true reward. And this is through verses like Matthew chapter 16, verses 20 through 28, when he says that, I'll read one part. You can go to it and look it up, because I'm not going to read all that tonight. My time is done. It's a beautiful place. Not if you don't understand it, but If you read it in the light of what I've been saying, you'll understand it. Because he goes into, he that wants to save his life will lose it, who shall lose his life will find it. For the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he shall reward every man according to his works. Same thing. There be some standing here, and that's he's putting kind of a timetable on it, which we have totally corrupted and missed. But there will be some standing here which shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom, the kingdom that cannot be shaken, is what he's addressing there. All right, so we're pretty well done. In Hebrews, let me just read this. In Hebrews chapter 10, verse 35, and I think we read this either last lesson or the one previous. In the light and the context of Christ coming, performing, and I didn't get to the sanctification part. We'll get into that and then get into chapter 5. But having presented him as coming to do the will of God, take away the first, establish the second, and all of that, and he'll say, by which we were sanctified. He has perfected those who he has sanctified through that one offering. Again, 6 days, seventh day is being looked at beautifully there. But he says in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 35, cast not away therefore your confidence, which has great recompense of reward. That is the very opposite of what Colossians, that's the same thing Colossians is saying, but it is cast not away your confidence because it has great recompense of reward. It's the same as don't let any man beguile you of your reward. How do you hold on to your reward? Confidence in the one who stands in the heavens as our salvation, as our sanctification, as our righteousness before God, as the one who has secured and procured all things. He is our life unto the Father. That's the whole reality of the high priest. He stands there sufficient before God, and we are accepted because he is accepted in God's sight. And that is the security of the matter. That's the reality of it. Therefore, do not cast away your confidence in his sufficiency, because there is the reward. His sufficiency is the reward. You already have it. Don't let any man take that reward from you, or he can't take it from you. He can't rob you of your salvation. But don't let any man deviate your attention and try to convince you that because you don't measure up to their man-made standard, their righteousness that they've created in their mind, that you have missed the boat or you have fallen short in some way. Isn't that what the beginning of chapter 4 says of Hebrew? Let us fear that any of you should seem or assume. That assumption comes through the doctrines of men and deception, that you have come short of it. What? The rest. The rest embodied in this high priest standing in the presence of God for us, securing our condition because we are secured in his. Cast not away your confidence. Confidently come to the throne, boldly come to the throne of grace and find the grace that holds you, anchors you. Because where he is, you are. So we'll stop there, and appreciate you guys being on tonight. Thank you so much. All of the thank yous for praying were at the beginning of the lesson, so I won't reiterate that. But let me just say, those of you who reached out with our personal situation and encouraged us and even gave to us for that, thank you. Again, the things like that are not taken for granted, and I appreciate it very much. Just know that there's no way I can prove it. Just I hope you know my heart, and this is a privilege for me to be able to do this. And I just thank God for it. And I thank God for you guys who are willing to sit here and listen to me ramble on. And I hope it is somehow used by God to be a real encouragement and edification to you in the things of Christ and his work. So with that being said, guys, we're going to stop this. I'm going to, let's see, the next lesson. If all things work out, it'll be the 8th of June. So please put that on your calendar or whatever. And the 8th of June will be our next one. Love you guys very much. See you next time.